Well, I'm Glen, Kenny's cousin, and we were born about 3 months apart. I was a little bit older. I think we started picking berries the next summer. I think we were short of 1 year of age out in the Puyallup Valley. And that's how I grew up with Ken and Ron and Rain and Lori and Skip out at the farm. So Kenny and I got pretty close. In our later years, we didn't talk a lot, we didn't see a lot, but he wasn't really a saint either. As Danny said, we were always challenged, and we liked to see what we could do about it. We took a lot of lickings from our dads and our moms. But I remember a few incidences. My dad, we had a cabin up on the Sistos River, and we were going to do a little building up there, and my dad had an old truck that he borrowed from somebody, and we had stopped at Gary's Dairy Queen at Puyallup. Some of you probably know where that used to be on the corner, and Dad bought us those big thick milkshakes, 25 cents a piece. And we were going up halfway up the hill, and this was really an old truck, and we'd finished our milkshakes, and a big black bald-faced hornet was in the front of the truck flying around. And I guess we were probably about 9 years old, and my dad, as some of you know, had a gun store, and we were going to go up there and do a little shooting and things like that too. But anyway, at this Gary's Dairy Queen, we had these great big straws. That's were 25 cents for these great big shakes. You know, not like the Michael Bloomberg cups, but these were huge. And my dad says, "Hey Ken, why don't you just suck up that bee in your straw and blow it out the window?" So I can remember Kenny just very carefully, these are those big straws, and he just put it up like that and sucked in, and here comes that black big old hornet right down his throat. And he says, "I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die!" And he reached in his throat and he started pulling his fingers out. The hornet was out there in a big ball of saliva on his lip. My dad was laughing so hard he almost drove off that south hill, and Kenny's still digging in his mouth, you know, thinking he's gonna die and having a big fit of it. Because Ken liked to accept a challenge, he figured he could do that. We spent a lot of time at Alder Lake in the younger years, and probably a lot of you younger people didn't get to go there, but our Uncle Moggy and Sophie had the Alder Lake Boathouse concession for years. And I remember one time Augie brought, well, let's see, I guess Ron, you were too young, but Augie, we worked really hard in the berry fields for about 10 years of our life to get enough money to buy bicycles. I think mine, I still have it, and it has a 1952 Puyallup bicycle license on it, so I know about the year. So a year or two after that, so Ken and I were about 12. Augie had their old Chevrolet, and he put Ken's bike in the back. And Ron and Ken had a little more money. They had a paper route, so they bought twin Phantoms. Mine's only a Meteor. Theirs had a horn on it, and I think it was about 70 bucks, and that was our life savings from picking berries for years. So anyway, Augie brought him out to the Puyallup Valley. We moved there in about 52, and with Ken's bike. And so my mom, in those days, I said, "You would never do this for your kids today." But the old bikes, you know, they didn't have gear shifts in those days, big old balloon tires. My mom made peanut butter sandwiches. Those days you never carried water with you either, I don't think. Everybody's got water bottles today. And we rode our bikes from Puyallup up to Alder Lake in one day. I think it's about 43 miles. Stayed overnight with Moggy and Sophie, rode all the way back down the mountain highway to Tacoma the next day. You know, you don't think anything of it. Today you wouldn't think of your kids doing those types of things, but that was the days. We, at Alder Lake one time, my dad came up, and we were real early. It was wonderful silver trout fishing, and he had an old Scottette Water 4-horse motor, and Kenny and I slept in the boathouse because that summer we got to work for Moggy and Sophie. And so Dad came up to go fishing, and Moggy had these old boats that hung over the end, and he said he brought this motor up, and Kenny says, "Here, let me help you, Uncle Chet," and he walked right off the end of the dock, just as easy as could be. We almost lost the motor too. And he came up, and it was cold, but I can still remember and see his face. at Alder Lake that summer, I think we were in the 8th or 9th grade, Ken and I slept down in the boathouse, and there was a lot of black people that came up, and they, at that time we called them black people. They told us that we weren't to call them Negroes, they were supposed to be called, they want to be called colored people. But with these people, we got to really become friends, and there were a bunch of them from Fort Lewis and that area, and they loved crappie. So we had a cousin, Swede Freed was his name, and I think Paul, he was Uncie's relative or something?
Uncie's nephew's children.
They lived up by, they were kind of hillbillies, they lived up there at Elby.
They were loggers.
Oh, loggers, okay. So he told us, he said, you can really get a lot of crappie if you dump cream corn at night under the lights at the dock. And so Ken and I would go out and we would catch 60, 70, 80 crappie and then sell them to all the people that came up from Fort Lewis and things, because they loved these for 25 cents a piece. Well, Moggy finally caught us and we couldn't sell game fish and all this sort of thing, so we got in trouble for that. Another time up there, we used to, I think the younger people were in, we used to play a game called Whale out there. Moggy had to corral all the great big logs that came down that might float into Alder Dam, and he had this big skiff and it had pike poles on it. And we'd play, I think Ron and Paul and I don't know about the girls, but we'd get out these pike poles, take them off those big, great big long ones they used, and we'd throw them at the logs playing, you know, like we were Captain Ahab or somebody, and one of them didn't have a plug in the end, it sunk in about 30 feet of water. So Ken says to me, he says, well, we're going to have to get that or we're going to get in trouble with Moggy. So I said, well, okay, I'll go down. So Ken says, well, you're going to need some weight. So we tied a half a cement block around my waist. And so I put a hose in my mouth. And I told Ken, I said, you know, if I pull 3 times on the cord, pull me up. So I dove off, and I'm down about 8 feet, my ears are splitting, and I'm pulling on the cord, and he thinks I want to go deeper. So I'm going down, I can't get a breath at all because I'm breathing the same air in as I've taken out. I can't breathe or anything. Tied the thing so tight around my waist, I can't get the block off. It finally came off, he pulled me up, hit my head on the thing, and we never did get the pike pole. So those are some of the experiences that we had with Ken. The Puyallup Valley Farm was another one. I mean, we all practically lived there during the summers, and I went by there today, and it kind of looks the same. Took my daughter Carrie, and the experiences we had there, we had some, you know, as I say, we had some challenging times. We had to pick a crate of berries every day before we could go play. So we picked like crazy, and I think we got $2 a crate or something like that. That was 24 boxes, those Kenner boxes. And then we could go play, so we'd pick real fast. Usually by noon we had our crate. And then we'd go into Uncle Ole's chicken house and steal eggs from underneath the chickens and then go throw them at the pigs. And I was the oldest, so I usually got in trouble for it. Sometimes Kenny did, but most of the time I think I took it, but I'm not too sure on that. We had a club out there, and I remember cousin Lori, she was the youngest. We told her, we said she could be president of the club if she rode the pigs. And so we kind of strapped her on. She went out, got bucked off, Kenny says to her, you got bucked off, you can't be president. And she cried. So those are the types of things we had out there. And I guess we had some relatives on my dad's side. Their names were McPhail. I guess they're not here. I wouldn't recognize them anyway. And there were 2 incidences. He had a beautiful Hudson car, and it was just polished, it was just beautiful. And he parked it down by the berry shack, and we picked our crate of berries, and they had Uncle Ole and Mike and Sam had a bunch of agricultural lime there in the shed, and we found out if we took this lime, we could put it on the car and draw pretty Indian pictures and things like that, teepees and all that. Well, I think I got a little help from Ken, but Ken and I spent the rest of the summer picking berries to get for a new paint job. The little kids didn't have any problems. They got out of it. So anyway, those are the types of things, and the only other thing about this McPhail kid, we weren't the easiest kids. The McPhail kid always picked more berries than we did. And So we had a little coalition. We said, you know, our moms and Catherine would say, well, if he can pick a crate and a half, you can pick a crate and a half. And it was one of these things, and we said, we don't want to do that. So Ken and I took this kid down, and we told him, don't pick any more berries than we are, don't pick any faster, and this sort of thing. And to seal it all off, I remember, I think Ron and maybe Paul were holding him down. Maybe the girls were too, but we sealed it all off by pulling his shirt up and tickling him with stinging nettles. So, so we weren't all nice little kids in those days.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are some of the things that went on in our earlier life. My sister Christy said she wishes she could be here, and so she was telling a little story about going out to what they called Wizard Island on Alder Lake. There was an island about a quarter of a mile away from the docks there, and she talked about she and Lorraine going out for a night. They built a camp with cedar boughs and all this, and they were going to stay. They were about 10 years old, and she said Kenny and I, and we were telling her how everybody's going to get them. There's no way they can last the night, and all this sort of thing, and so we went over and we made sure that they were nice and spooky. We howled like coyotes. You had to row over to this island and got them good in the spook. But Christy said they were really proud. They stayed the whole night and went and filled the whole boat full of water dogs the next day. And they used to catch those little water dogs and brought them in. But anyway, she sends her condolences. So anyway, my remembrances of Ken were pretty good. We didn't have a lot of time in the last few years. I heard him talking about shaking the house. Well, I built a house in Republic, and I don't know what year it was, in the 70s. Ken and his friend showed up to come over and deer hunt for a week, and they brought a camper over, and he and his friend split all the cedar shakes or tamarack shakes for my whole house. And I went by there this spring, and the shakes are still on the roof, so they must have done a pretty good job. And as I say, I remember Ken. He was really close, and all those years growing up, we had wonderful parents to guide us, and that's the way it was. They all of the unacceptable things that we did, they accepted for some reason. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I grew up with him too. But Glenn, you guys had the most fun. We did a lot of stupid things. I remember at my folks' house one time, we had this dumb game that Kenny and I invented because I had gotten a new bow and arrow set. And the idea of this stupid game, and I mean it was stupid. So we would be like where Ryan is back there, or Kevin I mean, and we would shoot the arrow up in the air, and the other guy would close his eyes and guess where it landed. This was a smarter game. So Kenny had this Tacoma belt, a big metal belt that said Tacoma. Well, I think now it says Tacoma, because one of my shots hit him right behind that belt. And of course, Kenny, being the actor that he was, oh my God, I killed him! And I thought I killed my cousin. So that was one thing I do remember. And he always was proud of showing that belt with the arrow dent in it. So anyway, and we took some trips when I got a car, an old 39 Chevy. We'd go down to the ocean because we were big boys now. But our first trip down there, we on the old highway, which a lot of you are too young to know about the old highway, but it was very windy. And we came around this one corner, or I should say I did, and Kenny was reading a book. Always loved to read. And the car started sliding around, and we ended up rolling and in a ditch. And I ended up underneath the car, and the car on top of me. Kenny was able to climb out. And then some guys from Minnesota came by, and they lifted the car off of me. The door had crushed like an accordion, so I didn't have too much weight on me. And then eventually a state patrolman showed up. Well, he got hold of Kenny's book, Kenny always had the right thing. The name of the book was The Crash Club. So, I remember that too. So, I don't know, I have a lot of stories with Kenny, but some of them I'd rather save. I mean, we did things like...
Family appropriate, please.
Yeah, right. We did, and then in the Air Force, I was in the Air Force, and Kenny, I didn't even know he joined the Air Force, and I saw this guy walking up the sidewalk down in Texas there, and God, that guy walks funny, you know? I recognized that walk, and here it was Kenny. So we had a week or two together there before we were shipped off our separate directions, and had a lot of fun down there too. And I used to go on camping trips with the whole Nelson family, because my parents weren't much into the camping and stuff, and they kind of took me in under their wings, and I went with the Petersons and the Nelsons on those camping trips, and we always had fun at that. And we did the rabbit hunting up on the San Juan Islands. And one day we were driving down the street, and Kenny and I saw a wounded little rabbit. So I think I was the one that picked up the rabbit and held it, and we saw a 2x4 there because we wanted to put the poor little thing out of the misery. Well, Kenny picked up the 2x4, hit the rabbit. The 2x4 was so rotten it fell apart. The rabbit's still alive, quivering. And the next thing I know, there's two 16, 17-year-old boys just crying their balls out.
Yeah.
Or I mean, bawling.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, we were tough.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of the highlights of things I remember. And Kenny was just a wonderful guy. He was like a brother to me because at that time in my life I didn't have any brothers, but later I did find 3 of them and a sister, but that's a different story. But this family means so much to me, just like Lorena had mentioned, because they took me under my wings, and I was an only child from Seattle, and my mother was Kenny's dad's sister, and I can't think of a better childhood than being with you folks. Thank you.
Thanks, Uncle Arnie.